What's good, folks? It's your boy Will Collins checking in once again with yet another video. Now, on my road to personal improvement, I've noticed just how many social media influencers and people in general talk about just how much reading and gaining knowledge from books is kind of like a cheat code to life, and also gaining expertise in your desired field. And it also doesn't hurt that it's pretty much a exercise for your brain and mind. As many may know, by the age of 25, your mind pretty much stops growing and your brain stops developing ways to learn effectively. When you're younger, of course, that's no issue because your mind is pretty much a sponge to whatever you feed it. Now, whether you feed it good or bad, it's pretty much hard to unlearn the bad and relearn what's good. So you have to kind of jump on it quick to get a good hold of what you need. Now, throughout high school and college, reading is pretty much paramount to successfully growing and progressing in your next steps in life. And I pretty much didn't have any deep conviction to do it at all. And in all honesty, I could probably say that I didn't read a full book my entire time in high school and college. Now, granted, I still graduated with great grades. The only reason I read a book was to basically get it chapter to chapter. And whenever I was done with an exam, I pretty much forgot what I learned throughout that past chapter and was focused on what I needed to learn in the current chapter for the next exam. Now, I wouldn't recommend that to anybody coming up in school at all because that's not a great way to retain information and be successful in your given field. And I take full responsibility for that lack of reading, but I'm definitely making a change now so I don't have to worry about it in the future. But now that I'm out of the rat race that I call college, I've noticed that I actually enjoy reading on my own terms and pretty much on things that I have an interest in and I want to take up in the future. And since graduating, I've invested more into my reading library, but not in the typical way that purchasing physical hard copies would give you. The first way I've been able to read more is through audiobooks. And the benefit to audiobooks, of course, is that you don't necessarily have to physically read them. You just have to listen attentively. And this is great for road trips and working situations that you usually do at a desk, like a 9 to 5 or a work from home situation. Now, in addition to audiobooks, my main method of reading is through ebooks. Now, like I said, I don't typically purchase hard copies, but that's mainly due to the fact that I don't have to spend money on the books that I actually want to read. And I won't get too deep into how I obtain the books that I do read, but I can pretty much find anything that I want to find. But the other reason that I like digital books is because you can pretty much read them anywhere, anytime. All the top books that I've found on different top 5 lists on social media and YouTube, I've pretty much been able to find and read. Some I finished, others I started, but most importantly, all of them I feel is perfect for me to learn from. Now, this video will pretty much be a top 5 list of the books that I've actually finished, because as I go through books, I typically highlight the main points in them, and I don't like to finish a book without having the main tips and tricks that I can pull and use throughout my life. Now, each of these titles have a specific significance as to why I chose to read them. And I'll be pointing out basically each reason as well as the best gems that I pulled from each of the books. So now that we covered all that, let's start with number 5, which just so happens to be The Psychology of Money by Morgan House. Now, like many before me, the main reason I read this book is because, like in the black community, we're not really taught financial literacy throughout school. And of course, in high school, you might be able to take a math class and economics class, but typically you have to choose that as an elective. It's not required like the other pointless classes that they actually do require for you to actually graduate. Now, that may be a slight shot to the education system, but when all said and done, throughout your life, financial literacy will definitely give you a more happier, successful life versus all the other pointless things that you literally forget right after you graduate. Now, I really wish I was privy to it earlier on, but I found that it's no point in wishing for a change in your past because you can only control what you do in the present moment. So that's pretty much what I'm doing now. And speaking of time, the most important lesson I got from this book happened in chapter 7, which says, controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. Because when you're in complete control of what you choose to do on a daily basis, that's really where true freedom comes from. Now, don't get it twisted. Yes, money is a big factor that plays into this personal freedom. But when it really boils down to it, time is what you're really in search for. Because without it, you can spend the majority of your life working yourself to the bone. Another quote that I pulled from it happened to be that money's greatest intrinsic value, and this cannot be overstated, is its ability to give you control over your time. Now, in addition to that tip, another complimentary lesson that I learned happened to be in chapters 3 and 10. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving, as well as the value of wealth is relative to what you need. And what I took from both of those is that once you have what you need to live a happy life with no worries, everything else is simply an added bonus. One thing to remember is that everyone needs the basics. Once they're covered, there's another level of comfortable basics. And past that, there's basics that are both comfortable, entertaining, and enlightening. At number 4, we have the self-titled book, Will, by none other than Will Smith. Now, I chose to read this book because out of all the celebrity figures in the world, as weird it may sound, I felt the most connected to Will Smith growing up. Now, initially, it might have honestly only been because we both go by the name Will. But more than that, I just felt like we were both very similar in nature because he's a very positive person to just look up to. He's also a decent looking guy who makes people laugh and always is great at perfecting his craft. Ever since I was first introduced to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I always got the sense that he never really took himself too serious because he always seemed modest even though I didn't personally know him. And as I got more into the book and kept reading, I still got that feeling, especially learning how he actually grew up and how it molded him into who he is. Now, what I took from his autobiography was that everybody pretty much has a story of their own. And most importantly, everybody has tangible lessons that they can actually use to help others navigate through life. More specifically, in a chapter titled Fear, he pointed out that 99% is the same as 0. Now, although it didn't immediately resonate with me, after he explained it, it made more and more sense once I thought about times that I didn't give 100% of myself. Now, no matter what, in anything that you do in life, if you're not giving it your complete all and your 100% effort, it honestly won't matter what the result is. You have to choose to go all or nothing in anything you're passionate about, or else you'll always live with a slight bit of regret. In addition to this point, in his chapter titled Ignorance, he points out that life is pretty much like school, with one key difference, because in school, you actually get the lesson, then you take the test. But in life, you actually get the test first, and it's your job to extract the lesson. And that's to say, in life, that sometimes you're given opportunities that you feel you're not even prepared for. But, like he says, living is a journey of not knowing to knowing. The whole point of venturing into uncertainty is to bring to light the darkness of our ignorance. So, be brave and create lessons out of everything that life throws your way. Coming into number 3, we have Disrupt You by Jay Salmon. Now, throughout this book, the main theme, like the title, is to always be a disruptor. Because if you aren't always in search of ways to reinvent yourself as well as your business, you can quickly get left behind without realizing it. Now, a lot of these lessons work whether you're in business for yourself or you work for a company. Now, without getting too deep into what exactly it talks about in the book, the best lesson that I learned was that to succeed in business, one must see oneself as a brand of one. Now, this pretty much consists of thinking yourself as a part of the value chain. And as many of my business people know, the value chain is made up of the research development, design, production, marketing and sales, as well as distribution. Now, as you apply it to yourself, the research development links, which are defined by your education, your previous work experience, and the sources you pursued to find a job in the first place. Now, the work you do and its quality and content makes up the design and production links. The way you present yourself professionally constitutes the marketing and sales links in your personal value chain. And where you work, with whom you work, and where you devote your professional energies determines the distribution link. Now, I took this to heart, especially because I see myself controlling all aspects of my life in the near future. And the only way to do that successfully is to consciously put in the work day in, day out that best represents the value that I want to bring to the table. Now, coming into a personal favorite of mine, number 2 happens to be Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. A lot of folks that I follow online who typically range from motivators to business professionals, they all have the same mindset. So when most of them recommended this book, it made sense as to why they did. Now, this book, more than anything, shows you that the only thing standing in your way between what you want in life is you. Now, that may sound cliche, but when you actually read the book, it mainly explains that your mind is the toughest battle that you'll ever face throughout your lifetime. Now, my favorite line in the book ironically comes from the very first sentence. People make habitual, self-limiting choices every day. That's why motivation is. And the reason it hit so hard is because throughout high school and college, the one thing that I thought I lacked to get me to that next step in life and in my evolution was actually motivation. But after a while, I noticed that I always needed to replenish the motivation that I found whenever I hit a milestone. And after a while, I knew that this wasn't a process that was sustainable. And after reading about all that he went through to get where he is today, it showed me that in order to conquer the world, you must first conquer yourself. Like he says, self-mastery will empower you to face reality, hold yourself accountable, push past pain, learn to love what you fear, relish failure, live to your fullest potential, and find out who you really are. And now that I realize this, I can finally take accountability in becoming the person that I see myself being. And with that, leads perfectly into my number 1 book that I've read, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Now, this book points out and explains pretty much how and what habits shape your life. And without knowing it, people live life based on habits that they've created for themselves. Be it conscious or unconscious, if you create a journal of your life, 9 times out of 10, you'll notice and be able to point out what types of habits you naturally fall into. And the more I thought about what makes the most successful people who they are, the more I realized that they all follow a set routine that may seem trivial on the surface, but when compounded, creates the biggest waves of movement that gets them to where they need to be. Figuring out who I saw myself as and who I wanted my future self to be was the first step. And creating that lifestyle and the routine that made that person was actually step 2. And like I said initially, the book points out how to create these habits as well as how to remove the bad ones. And it pretty much all starts with the 4 laws of habit creation. Making habits obvious with cues, making habits attractive with cravings, making habits simple with responses, and making habits satisfying with rewards. Now, hopefully those sound straightforward enough for you to understand so you can kind of implement them. But if not, make sure to find the book and dive deeper into what goes into each and every law. But now, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching if you got this far. Hopefully you learned something that you didn't know before, and you can actually use this to improve your own life. Now, if you enjoyed the video and got some value from it, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and of course follow the channel so you'll know what videos I'll be coming up with later. If you want me to do another list of books and the best lessons that I got from all that I'm reading, be sure to drop that in the comments and let me know. But that's all I have for you today. But until next time, peace.